What's up everyone, this is Luke Millar and I'm going to give you a quick tutorial of a couple of newer React features that were introduced in React 16. Handful of new features in React 16. 16.2 had a couple of minor updates, but important ones. And then 16.3 looks like it has a handful of new ones as well. So I thought that for me, it would be useful to get to know those changes, why they were introduced, what you should even be using them for. And then I'll do a couple of these videos to kind of demonstrate them and show what they're good for, why you would use them, how you would use them. So let's jump in to, I have a very simple React app that's running here. As you can see, it's a beautiful web page with a very colorful background. There's not much happening here. I have an app and it has a div in it with some styles. So great. So this is where we're going to start. And what we're going to build today, what we're going to demo, what I'm going to show you is the new portals tutorial feature in React 16, and why it's important and what you might use it for. So this is actually something that I ended up using it for at work just this week, and thought it was pretty cool and wanted to show you guys how it works and what you could use it for. So let's say we want to make a login screen. You click a login button and then you get like kind of a popover. Maybe it's not the best product idea, but just as a demonstration, you get a popover that has the login in it. So how are you going to do that popover? You could import Bootstrap and use their Modal. There are a handful of Modal projects out there that you can use, or you can make your own. And so we're gonna make our own. So let's say we have a div, we have a title in here. Let's say we want this to say sign up. Great. So let's see, that looks wonderful. And actually we want this to look better than that. So we're gonna create a title component. Here, sure. Let's just create one that's pretty simple. And it's just a simple component that takes in a child here. And we're gonna render that in a div with its own styles. We're going to render children here right in the middle of that div. So anything that's in between the brackets on title are just going to get rendered inside this div, basically. So that title is going to get replaced with this div. And we're going to put our own styles in here. And let's just say we're going to make this big. It's font size 90. We want this to look really good. Let's do make this look great. Text transform. We're going to do some uppercase with a letter spacing. Let's do big letter spacing, and we're going to do font family. Do I have that already? I don't have that. I'm going to move that up, actually. Font family, and we're going to pick Lato here, which I have actually already imported from Google Fonts. And actually, I'm going to pull this out just because this is going to get messy to look at. So we're going to go title styles here, and I'm just going to paste that. Cool. And if I save that, we should see this update, and hey, we have sign up. Great, cool. Now we need to make this so that you can click on it, so we can pop up our modal. You can add like a click handler to title, but something that I like to do is, let's just do this. You can do this however you want, but let's make this clickable. Cool, what's clickable? I don't know, we're gonna make it ourselves. So clickable looks like this. We're gonna do, yeah, and it's like, complaining because what's clickable. We're going to create another component here. Takes in children again. And this is going to be we're going to need more than this. So we're going to go class, clickable. It's a extends component. It's going to have a render function, and the render function is going to return a div again. And it's going to put, we're going to put the children inside. So this .props.children. So we're going to put that inside. So if we do that, okay, it should work. Great, nothing different. We just add another div here. And then we're going to put on here a couple of of events. So we're going to say on mouse over, and we're going to have a mouse over, on mouse out, because we want hover states on this clickable thing. We want down states, up states, we want all that stuff. So let's do mouse out, on mouse down, this dot mouse down, great, and on mouse up, this dot mouse up, wonderful. So now we need to implement these functions. Not too hard. Mouse over, we're just going to keep track of this in state. So on mouse over, we're going to say this dot set state. We could have just done this in line, but I like this better. Let's say mouse over, we're going to say hover, true, great. And then we're going to have a similar function, mouse mouse out, and that's going to be hover false, great. We're going to initialize our state, so hover is false, and then down is also false, so we're going to initialize our state here. Mouse down, you guessed it, we're going to say this dot set state down is true, and mouse up, wonderful, this dot set state down false, great. So now we have this state that's keeping track of our state here. Nothing happens on it because we haven't hooked it up to anything. So now what we're going to do is inside our render function, we're going to change the styles on this depending on the state. So we're going to say style, and let's just change the color, for example. So on down, we're going to change the color to black. So this dot state dot down, if it's down, we want it to be black. If it's not down, we want it to be white. And then separately, let's say we'll put opacity on hover, just so you can see that separate. This dot state dot hover, and when it's hovered, we're going to go light opacity, and then when it's not hovered, we're going to go regular. So you can see here we have, if we go over here, when we hover, the opacity goes to 0.5, and then when you go down, it goes black, and when you go up, it goes back up to white. But you know, hovered, so those are semi-transparent. So there you go. So that works. It makes that look like it's interactive, and it's more interesting than just a piece of text that you can click on that has an on click. And in fact, speaking of which, we need to pass that through here. So on click, let's do that. This dot props, and we're just going to pass this through. Actually, this might not be necessary. But I kind of like to be explicit about this, but I think you can just put the on-click handler on clickable anyway, and it would do the same. But there's one more thing that we're going to do with this, and I want to add a couple more styles, so let me just clean this up real quick. Let's do a clickable styles, just for speed here. Cursor, we're going to do a pointer, right? Make it look like it's clickable. We'll put those in. And if we come back over here to our app, oh, it hates us. Crap. Whoa. What just happened? Yeah, obviously. We don't have state there. I'm just going to put those back here. Great. That's fine. We can do this. This is one thing that I like to do. So we have like our styles here, and we're just going to bring those in that way, and then we can override the things that are dependent on state. So now we have a cursor, and it has state, and oh, you don't want that, like when you're clicking on it, so we're going to get rid of that too. The selection, so user select is none. Great. And so now you can click it. This isn't selectable because it's a button. That's great. It feels more like a real button and not like some web text that you can kind of select and copy out. Great. So that's our clickable. So we're going to add an on-click handler to this. And on-click, we want to show our sign-up modal. That doesn't exist yet, but we're going to go create that. So let's say on-click, we'll just do this in line. Here, this set state, and we're going to say show modal true. Let me initialize our state here. State show modal false, just to be explicit with that. And so now when we click this, now show modal is true, even though you can't see it because we haven't done anything with it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create our modal component, and we're going to show it. So we're going to say this state show modal, and we're going to say we're going to render our modal. This is my sign up modal. And so this component doesn't exist yet, but this is the one we're going to create now. So let me import that. The file doesn't exist, but that's fine. We'll put it here. And actually, I'm just going to organize this a little bit more. Components, modal. Let me create a folder here. Components. If you go in here, I'm going to create a modal component. Great. And then let me just copy this over. Class modal extends component, and it's going to have a render function that's going to return. Let's just start with this. Great place to start with a new component, or it just returns a div and it renders the children inside it. So now if we do this and we save, it doesn't like that. Components, did I spell that wrong? Components. No. What? Oh, I spelled modal wrong. Great. So that saves there. Great. And now I need to export it. I didn't export it. Great. So if I click on this now, the modal should show up. And there's some text. This is my setup. It looks beautiful. All right, so now we're gonna let's go style this thing first. And what this looks like, so we're gonna have like let's do a background first, and then we're gonna do like our modal container. And so the modal is gonna take up the full screen conceptually, but we'll only see the container that kind of floats in the middle there. And so the background is we're gonna position this absolute, top 0. We're just gonna take up the whole screen here. Width, let's go 100%, height 100%. And we can even make this like a semi-transparent black or something. Background color, and we can just do black, semi-transparent. So we'll add like a half there. Great. So we set our style here, styles, that's not what I called it, but I'm going to call it that. Now when I click on this, nothing happened. Let me just inspect here and see what's happening, so we can see where we are. So this is my sign up modal, styles, background. Oh, background color. Ugh, dumb. Okay, so I didn't actually pass anything in. That's why I was confused. So yeah, I do that. There you go. Now you can see it. Semi-transparent black. Here's my sign up modal. Looks wonderful. So now I'm going to put a container because I want like a white background thing in the middle. So div style. We're going to do styles. This is going to be our container here. And we're going to close this off with another div. And so this container, we're going to do a background color is just going to be white. And let's make this look great. Border radius 10. We're going to do a box shadow on it, which we probably don't need because of the black background, but whatever. 0, 0, 10 pixels. And we're going to make this the same color here. So in fact, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the background color. And then, so when we click on that, now you can see it there. That looks wonderful. We're going to make it a size, so we're going to put a width on it. Let's just call it 650 for now, and a height of 350, sure. And then that's not centered. We want it to be centered, so we're going to say display flex on the outer container here, align items center, justify content center. And now if we look at that that modal, it should be, yep, right there in the middle of the screen. And if you can see the text, you can't really see the text because it's white, so we're going to fix that. So on our container, we want our text color to be black. Sure. Beautiful. And I'm going to add some padding to the container because we don't want the text right on the edge like that. So let's put a padding of 50 just all the way around it. There you go. Doesn't look horrible. Okay, great. So then you can put whatever you want inside this container and it renders. But we want our modal, we want to be able to close it. Like if you click out of it, close it, maybe if you hit escape. So we're going to do a couple of those things, which isn't too bad. So on our background, we say like on click. Let's just say clicked background. Great. So we're going to create this function. And when we close it, since the modal, it's not going to close itself, it's going to use a prop that's passed in to close. So whoever's calling it can figure out how it wants to close it. So I'm going to say props on close, and we're just going to assume like that this function, you have to pass in that prop. It's required. So we'll just call on close here on the background clicked, and then let's go over to our app where we do the modal. We're going to implement on close. And then on close, we're just going to do the opposite of this one here. And we're going to say set state show modal false. So now when you click on the background, the on close prop is going to be called, that function. It's going to set the state show modal false. We're going to re-render, and now that it's false, it's not going to be shown. So if we open it up, open this, and I'm going to click on here out in the background, and it closes. Great, that's exactly what we want. Okay, so the problem is, though, now, if I click right here on the modal itself, it also closes because this modal gets the event first, this div does, and then it kind of cycles up through the DOM tree. So this modal will get it, and then the background will get it, and so the background gets the on click and it closes. So what we want to do is if the modal itself, the container here, gets an on click, we want to cancel that event. Don't let it bubble up to the background. And so we're going to add another on click here on the container itself, and we're going to just say stop propagation on that. So if we do that, and we open it, now I can click here on this inside, and that's fine. And if I click out, it closes. Perfect, that's what I want. And then one other thing that I want to add to this is to have it close when you hit escape. And so we're going to do that by saying component did mount, because we kind of want this the escape to work no matter where you're focused. It's possible that you don't have a modal that takes up the full screen, and that maybe you have this split, and so your focus could be somewhere else. But we want it no matter what. If you hit escape when there's a modal up, just close it. And so what we're going to do is on component, let's say did mount. We're going to say document.add event listener key up. And we're going to say what's the key up. We're going to create this function, and then let's just do that. Great. Component will unmount, and we gotta do the opposite, right? So when it unmounts, so that we're not just leaving a bunch of these event listeners, remove event listener, and we're gonna same thing, key up. We're gonna reference the same function. So we need to implement this function, and this is gonna be easy. If I think it's key equals escape, this dot props dot on close. Call that prop. Oh, not equals. That's not good. And so now if I open this up and I hit escape, great, it closes. And if I hit another character, it doesn't close. So hitting escape, close, click outside, close, click inside, stays open. Great, so this is already starting to feel pretty good in terms of functionality that we want. Yeah, so we feel pretty good about this modal. Now you could style it however you want. You could put an X in the corner that ties to that same unclose. So Luke, you didn't even mention portals. Yeah, so that's next. So here's the problem that you'll have with this. So let's open this up and we're going to inspect this. So if you look in our DOM tree, we have we have a div here that is holding our title, our sign up title, right? So we have a div that's the full screen. This is our purple and pink background. Inside it, we have a div that's centered that holds our sign up. And then we have a div as like a sibling to it that is this modal. So it's the background, and then inside is the container. I'm just going to make one change here just to show this. I wouldn't really do this, but just for the sake of the just for the sake of a demo here. Let's say we do this. Let's say you have another div here, because this happens once you have more complex apps. Let's say like a title wrapper or something. Great. And sometimes you'll end up in this situation where your title wrapper actually, it has some styles on it like position relative, and let's say it even says like overflow hidden. And so now what you have here, let me just inspect real quick. So now what we have is, so we have our background, then we have this div that's position relative, overflow hidden, and inside it we have our title. And that's fine. If you click on the title, now that's what our modal looks like. But why does our modal look like that? Because our modal is actually rendered inside this div that's set overflow hidden, right? So like the modal is a part of that overflow hidden that has like a width and a height on it. And so it's just getting cut off. And so now you can't see the whole modal. Clicking outside, it does nothing because it's trapped and it's just cut off outside of that. And so it's like, well, that kind of sucks, right? That's not what you want. And then, I mean, even looking at the DOM, it's like, well, that's not even how you would structure it, right? Like you wouldn't put a modal inside your title object, even if that's where, or inside a button, right? Even if that's where it was getting clicked from. You just wouldn't structure it that way. But because of React, it kind of pushes you to structure things that way because, you know, you're calling and you're setting state and you're saying, I want to show this modal and I'm inside this component that's choosing to show this modal, whether or not to show it or hide it. And so you're kind of stuck in that. And so that's where portals comes in. It actually lets you render a component and pick a different spot in the DOM tree. And so this is interesting, one of those splits between your React tree, your virtual DOM tree, and your browser DOM tree, where they don't align. So you can have it so that you have a modal component inside your, whatever we call this, our title wrapper. Conceptually, it's there, and inside the component, it's there. But in the DOM tree, it's not there. We can put it somewhere completely different so that it doesn't have to like follow those same rules. So for a modal, you mostly want your modals to live at the root, so that they don't have any other like styles or constraints applied to them. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go in here and let's go to our HTML. And so you can see this. We have our div. This is our root. This is where we render our whole app, right, inside this div. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of this. We're going to call this one the modal root. Great. And so we have this extra div in here. And now what we want to do is we want to render this modal inside that modal root. We don't want to render it inside our app root, but inside the modal root, because we want it to be, you know, on top of everything. And in fact, you could even, okay, maybe this isn't a great idea, but you say, you know, you can even do like z index. I want this like 10,000 because the modals always need to be on top of everything. Great. So then, so how do you get it to render in there? The way that you would do it is inside our modal component. What we're going to do is this. We want to render this inside the modal root. So I'm going to make another function here and says like render modal. And I'm just going to move with this stuff in here so that we have it as its own function that we can reference. And so now in our render, we are going to do, we're going to call React DOM. And in fact, I need to import this. Import React DOM from React DOM. Great. React DOM, and we're going to call create portal. So if you look here, create portal takes in two parameters. The first one is the child, the actual component that you want to render. And so here, this is easy. We have this render modal. That's what we want to render. And then the second one is the element that you want to render it in. Okay, so we don't have a reference to that element, but we can get one. It's pretty easy because it has an ID. And so what we're going to do is say on component did mount. Actually, this is not what we want. We want, let me put it in the constructor because we want it before the first render, not after. So we're going to say super props. Great, we got to pass that in. And we're going to say this dot element equals document dot get element by ID. And we're going to say we want it modal root. Great. And then one other thing that we're going to do, actually this is we're going to call this modal root here. We're going to create a new div where we're going to render our modal. And so we say this element, we're going to create a new div here, document dot create element, and we're going to create a div. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the div inside this modal root. Add append child, great. And we're going to append this element. This way, if you have multiple instances of this modal component, it'll work, right? You can put more than one element inside here, and you can have multiple modals, whether or not you want that. But in this case, that's what we're going to do. And so each one is going to get added. But we also have to make sure that we clean this up. So then what we're going to do is in component unmount, we're going to say modal root. We're going to remove the child, and we're going to pass in this element. So we just want to make sure that we actually clean up our modal root and aren't polluting it with modals as we go. So now we have this element, and we're going to pass it in to create portal. Oh, and we need to return this. Great. So if you do this, now what do we have? So we still have our div. Let me just inspect and show you. So we still have this div that is overflow hidden, that just kind of wraps our title and our pointer. And then we have inside it, we have our clickable thing here that gives us our hover states, and then we have our sign up button. Great. So we're going to come in here, and I'm going to click on this. Hey, and now our modal actually shows the whole thing. It's not cut off. And so if you look at the inspector, we have our root div. We have inside it this overflow hidden. We have our title and our button, our sign up button. That's huge. Great. And then that's it. It's clean. There's nothing else in there. And so if you go back out to the root and you look at modal root, you can see, hey, we actually have a div in here, a new div that has inside it our modal. And it has our background, it has the container, and then it has the contents inside the container as you would add those. And so now, as you can see, this all just works. So escape works to close this again, clicking outside works, clicking inside doesn't close it. And everything just kind of works together to like make sure that it doesn't matter what you do to, or like where you're rendering a modal, where in the React tree, it will always just, it'll always render at the root of your whole page so that it shows up in the right spot. And that it looks right and that it's not polluted with other styles because of who knows where you're nesting it, which is pretty cool. And so that's one example of what you would use it for. There are a bunch of other cases that I could think of that you might want to use it for, but this one seems pretty obvious as a good example. One question that comes up is, well, what happens? Because since the tree structures are not the same, right? What's the parent of this modal? Is the parent of this modal the title wrapper where we put it, or the app where we put it, or is it the modal root? And that is a great question. And the answer is kind of depends on what you're talking about. So for things like events, usually like an on-click event, it bubbles up. It starts with the the deepest element that gets clicked, and then that gets a chance to handle it, and then it goes up to the parent, and then its parent, and it follows up the DOM tree like that. That's how that usually works. With portals, it actually follows the React virtual DOM tree. And so in this case, if you have an on-click on your modal and the modal chooses not to handle it, that actually falls back now to, in our case, our title or our clickable or our title wrapper, and then back to our app. And so it actually follows the React tree. It doesn't follow your browser DOM, which is pretty cool because that's probably what you mostly want to have happen. So pretty cool feature. I think a lot of people haven't already started using it, but maybe you have. Curious if you guys have thoughts on what else you might use it for, what you're using it for already, or how you would use it. But I thought it was pretty cool. It actually came in handy just this week at work. Ended up using this for something very similar to this that I just demonstrated, and thought it would be useful to share. So let me know if there are other questions or other topics that you think would be interesting or useful to learn or find out. And my strategy is just to kind of go through a bunch of the new React features and kind of one by one figure them out for myself so that I can even understand what they are and why I should be using them, and then kind of learn it well enough that I can explain it and demonstrate it in a project here, and maybe that ends up being useful for someone else. Maybe it doesn't. That's fine. I don't really care. You don't have to watch. So yeah. Anyway, if you made it this far, you're really desperate for knowing how to use portals. But yeah. All right. We'll see you guys later. Peace out.